So we're at the beginning of stewardship season, which is everyone's favorite season in the church. Every year I make that joke, but there are some of you who do love stewardship season. You love it, and I admire you. It's not my favorite season, but we're in this together. This is a really great text for the start of a stewardship season. Paul is writing to the church at Corinth, encouraging them to give to the collection, as they called it. And the collection was a gathering of all kinds of things. It's the same kind of way that we try to talk about stewardship here, that it's not just about your financial resources, although it is about that. We're also stewarding time and talent among the folks in our congregation as well. All of these gifts that we bring make up the collection. And Paul's encouraging Corinth to give in the same way as the church in Macedonia gave. Not because their pocketbooks were particularly fat, but because our covenant relationship with God and one another means that we give in joy and during affliction, like the Macedonians gave, so that abundance and need are balanced in the context of community, because giving is part of the generative nature of God. It's fundamentally true about God. God is gift and gives. That's the nature of the holy, and is an act that we are called to as the body of Christ in the world. It's really a perfect stewardship text. Because the nature of God is gift, we are called to give. Because the nature of God is justice, we are called to give out of our present abundance so that everyone eats. That's one of the first lessons in the Garden of Eden. Everyone has to eat, and we as humanity are to make sure that everyone eats. Because hoarding creates death, we are cautioned to watch out for greed, for our own greed. And we are not called to give in a way that creates unreasonable pressure on our households. Do you see that? Do you see that right there in the text? That Paul says, don't give so that it creates unreasonable pressure on you. That's not what I'm asking, because everyone's context is different, right? Everyone's context is different, and I have no way of knowing what's going on in your bank account, nor should I. No one is peering over your shoulder. This is between you and God. But here's what we are called to: an honest examination of where our heart lies. An honest examination of where our heart lies. This morning, I want to draw that text to the Corinthians and the concept of generosity into conversation with our own community, with you. To think about it not in an abstract kind of way, but generosity as a particular kind of commitment to a particular kind of community. And I think we should begin by thinking about what kind of community we are, in broad strokes. I am fresh off the press with this little lecture, having delivered it to the council yesterday as we were gathering for some work together as a leadership team to do some discerning. So we're a faith community, right?
Right.
I'm just trying to see if you're alive. I care about your aliveness. We are in covenant relationship with the United Church of Christ. Is that accurate? Yes. All right. We are practicing congregational polity. A part of us, yes, thank you. A part of us that is so important, we include it in our name. First, United Church of Christ. Ooh, I just got louder. Maybe I need to fix this. Many of you, maybe even most of you, you don't need a primer on the history of Congregationalism. But not all of us grew up Congregationalist. How many of you are cradle Congregationalists? Look around. Not very many. Like Anne is the real deal. She's literally a cradle Congregationalist. And Shauna's might be literally a cradle Congregationalist. You are too? All right, there are 3 of you in that party. But I want to remind us about Congregationalism a little bit. There is a history professor in the audience that makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm going to pretend they're not here. Congregationalism grew up alongside America. The Puritans who settled in colonial New England wanted to create Christian churches not subject to the authority of any bishop, any pope, any political system. Congregational governance, by the people, for the people, took shape alongside the philosophies shaping the broader political context of the 18th and 19th centuries. Our churches were self-governing, founded in mutual love with an ideal of non-hierarchical structure. That sounds nice, right? Maybe. In ideal, it sounds great, right? That's what we want. Congregationalists believe that we create church together, not through a vertical platform, but through a gathering of the wisdom and gifts of community. Congregationalists believe that the interdependence of the community is what makes it work. That our ministry is collaborative and shared. That it is not up to the minister to make congregational life successful, but the people who must do the work of the congregation. Congregationalism was created to be the polar opposite of a church where parishioners show up, pay a fee, receive, and retreat, with little to no responsibility for life together. We created this. Our ancestors created this because they wanted something more real. But for years, in parallel with the rise of consumer culture in America, Congregationalism has been shifting quietly and without much alarm. As culture shifted, as incomes rose dramatically in the 1990s, I don't really remember that because I was 20. But some of you remember income rising dramatically in the 90s. Here's the thing, charitable giving and volunteerism did not also rise in the 1990s. You could spin that data in a lot of ways, couldn't you? But the bottom line is this: we Americans began to spend more money on ourselves than ever before. And we began to consume time in different ways too. We began to prefer to hire professionals to do what once belonged to the arena of volunteerism. And churches began to think that institutions and corporations had something really great going on. They had professionals doing the work. They had people who knew what they were doing the work. So churches began to add more and more professional staff and programming to keep up with the demands of congregants who had less and less time to give to the community, by choice or by necessity. And I am not here to argue if it is choice or necessity that keeps us so busy and overscheduled today. I'm just noticing that this has been increasing in how it works in America since the 90s, and it is not slowing down. And we see this shift even in our own congregation, don't we? Some of you really clearly see this shift as you have traveled with this place for many years. Areas of church life that were once led and staffed by lay ministry, what do we do now? Pete Nelson? We hire people to take care of things. Yeah? Like take care of the yard and take care of the landscaping and take care of the trees, because the people who used to do that work are getting older. This is what happens in community, right? And we don't have people stepping into those roles. So we hire professionals to do the work. And that might be fine. No judgment. But here's the only way it's going to be fine. If everyone triples their pledge for the next several years, we can just spend that money and we can create a bigger and bigger staff and more and better programming. But I wonder if that's what we want. Is that how we want to do church? I think, actually, that it's not. Even though you are busy, even though you are tired, I think that we still have that same spark as those Puritan ancestors. People who want to have a part in creating the world they hope for. People who want to shape congregational life through conversation and experiment and dreaming, not call in the so-called professionals to do that work for them. I think we're people who want to be bound to one another in the human project by affection, rather than have to, or rather than dogma, or rather than the person at the top telling us what to do. I think we want to be together in mutuality and interdependence, not showing up to consume ritual once a week and retreating back to our isolated spaces. But to do that, I think we have to reclaim some of our congregational roots. We have to remember that it is no one's job. It is no one's project but yours to make congregational life successful. It's not my job. It's not Amber's job. It's not even the big boss, Anamika's job. It's not, because we are Congregationalists. And you might think I'm talking myself out of a job right now. But I think there's a space for religious professionals in the congregation. It's just that the religious professional is not the heart of the congregation. I can't do that for you. Our church, like most others, falls in the category of the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule. 80% of our giving units, that's households that make a tithe or a pledge to the church, or so that might be more than one person in a household, it might be a single person in a household. 80% of our giving units make up for 20% of our total donations. Did you hear me? 80% make up about 20% of our total donations. 3%, this is really so shocking to me, I'm going to choke on. 3% of you make up almost 37% of our total pledge income. Just a little over 20% of our total worshiping population carries about 80% of our total pledge income. And among our worshiping population, almost 70 people, households, pledge units, do not make any kind of commitment during stewardship season. you can probably see the problems for yourself, right? My curiosity, though, doesn't really lay with statistics. I'm interested in the concept of generosity. Those early Christians, the Macedonians that Paul writes about, they didn't give because it was easy. It wasn't like they could write a check and the monthly budget wouldn't be impacted by it. They could still go out to dinner on Friday night, keep their Netflix running. They didn't give to an operating budget. They didn't give to keep the lights on, to recreate yesterday or just get through this year. They gave because generosity is a fundamental part of being a person of faith. Giving is as fundamental as the character of God. And that's a lesson as old as manna in the wilderness. Remember what hoarding creates? Rot, decay, death. The lesson of manna is that the economy of God must resist the system of Egypt with its strategies for accumulation of personal wealth. Israel is instructed to keep abundance circulating, to not give in to the myth of scarcity, to not give in to that thought that I have. You have to remember when I preach a sermon like this, I'm talking to myself first. I think if I increase my commitment to the church this year, I won't have enough for A, B, and C. That might be true. But is it a mindset of abundance or is it a mindset of scarcity? In the Gospel of Matthew, the scripture instructs us, do not store up treasures on earth where moths and thieves destroy, but store up your treasure in heaven. For where your treasure is, there lies your heart. For where your treasure is, there lies your heart. So the question for all of us is, where is your heart? Is your heart in this community? Are you enough a part of creating the work of God in this place that you are also committed to nurturing it? In a way, I'm asking, are you living up to the contract that we make with one another in a congregational church? Stewardship season is important because we make commitments for the year based on the commitments you make to this place. We make decisions about roofs and paint and salaries. We make decisions about how invested we can be in our local community, our conference, the whole UCC denomination, and justice witness work in our state and beyond. Your participation, it really does matter. We're in this together. The church relies on all of us bringing our treasure to the common vision we hold, which is a very compelling vision to me, to the language of belovedness, to the commitment to the good news, freedom for the prisoner, welcome for the stranger, care for the widow, justice for the foreigner, and abundance for the poor. Where is your heart? Where is my heart? Our bank statements will probably tell us something about where it is. Maybe it's with your children. It's a good place for your heart to be. Putting them through college or paying preschool tuition. Maybe it's with your house, your mortgage, your social life, your therapist, your shoe collection. Oh, the Democratic Party, or any party. I'm not here to pass judgment. I am here to ask you to consider it. Where does your heart lie? And if it doesn't lie here, why not? Is it because you aren't a part enough of this community to co-create the future we want? The very nature of who we are invites you to do this. We exist as Congregationalists only because you are here. This whole thing is an experiment that exists between us. We make a covenant with one another. We say that we will create and nurture together. We're not here to service you. We're not here to prop you up on a Sunday morning to get you through the week. We're just not that kind of church. We are here to create relationships of reciprocity that we believe will extend well past Sunday morning. Maybe an ethic of generosity hasn't been modeled for you. I want to ask you more than anything to be reflective during this season. What is your value system around money and generosity? Do you operate from abundance or scarcity? How we steward our resources is a daily choice. And it reveals so much about what we believe is true. Stewardship, our glorious stewardship committee, will ask you to make a pledge to the church this season. I won't. I'll ask you to make a commitment of generosity. I will not tell you what that looks like. I can't. Only you know what a commitment of generosity would look like for you. The Stewardship Committee will ask you to meet our operating budget for 2019. I won't. I will ask you to give in a way that supports our flourishing, not just our survival. I will ask you to give in a way that reveals your heart, that demonstrates your commitment to our mutual creation of this community, that will take the good news from possibility to promise. Amen.